Now, it's all good and well to use Python and pre-assign variables, but it doesn't make our programs very smart. To do this, we want to actually start getting input from the user. And the easiest way to do that is to use input boxes. So in this video, we're going to write a program that asks for someone's first and last name and then prints that out. So the first thing I need to do is make a variable for the first name. So I'm going to go ahead and call it first name. It would make sense for that variable. Now this is where it gets a little bit different. As before, I might just assign the variable like so. I want to ask the user. So whenever I want to ask the user to type something in, I use a keyword called input. I open the brackets and I kind of ask the question for what I want the user to do. So in this instance, I'm going to say, what is your first name? Hit that and close my bracket. So I just have inside of quotation marks the string that I want it to print out and ask. So I'm going to say last name equals, and again, hey user, can you put in your last name? So what is your last name? Oh, hit my caps lock. Last name, close that. Now I'm going to run this here to see what it does so far. So I'll clear my shell. So if we look down in my shell and I run it, what is your first name? Simon. What is your last name? Lydiard. What has that actually done? Well, I'm going to use my little variables tab here just to show us what that's done. Look over on the right, it's actually made the first name variable equal Simon and the last name variable equal Lydiard. So let's use these values. I'm going to say print your first name is, put my little comma, I'm going to put in whatever the user has inputted at this point. I'm going to say first name, I'm going to say your last name is, comma, I'm going to say last name. Now I just want to point out the syntax is really important in the print function. So I've said print, open my brackets, put in a string. Now I want to add something from a variable, so I put a comma there, so it depends on the value of the variable, then another comma because I'm adding another string, then another comma, then last name. So let's run this now. What is your first name? Ronald. What is your last name? McDonald. Your first name is Ronald, your last name is McDonald. Let's run it again. What is your first name? Ham. Last name, Burglar. Your first name is Ham, your last name is Burglar. So as you can see, it's actually using the value that the user gives us. So with this information, I'm actually going to go back to my little number generator, I guess, my little calculator type program. Here, I'm actually predefining what numbers I wanted to run. But I want to print the results based on what the user puts in. So it's pretty easy to do. Up here at my first number, I want to ask the user for something at this point. So it's pretty easy to do. Now, if I do this, input what is the first number, and I try run it because it will try and use whatever that is and 7.25, it's going to throw an error at me. Okay, the reason being, if you just say input and you ask for something, you're not telling it what type of thing or what type of variable to expect to use. So right now, it's trying to take a string value, so a text value, and do an operation on it with a number. And you can't actually do that when you have a text value and a number. You can't multiply or add or take them because it thinks one is writing and one is a number. One is a string, one is a number. So I need to tell it what to actually expect. Now in this instance, because I'm using decimals, I'm going to tell it that you're going to expect a float. Open brackets, close brackets at the end. So I said, hey, your first number is going to be a float, and the user's going to give it to you. Again, I'm going to say the second number is going to be a float, and the user is going to give it to you. Let's close that and close that. So if I run this now, I can say 10.25, I can say 12.3, and it will do all those operations for me. Now there's another kind of number, and you can use whole numbers by going int. Now, what you need to know about this is you can't use decimal values with an int because it's expecting an integer or a whole number. So if I said 12 and then I said 10, it will go ahead and do that again for me. So again, if I want to accept input from the user, our keyword is input. If you want just a string value, you only have to say input, then ask them for what you want. If you want to put in another type or get another type of value, you need to specify before you ask for the input. And that is using inputs in Python.